Coming up this week, we've got news from Royal Caribbean, which is both good and bad. We talk about their new ship and about an overbooked ship. Then there's the final word on Sodagate on MSC Cruises. There's yet more news from Alaska about the latest efforts in one community to impose restrictions on cruise ships. MSC Cruises announce yet more new itineraries, this time for the Southern Caribbean. We talk about strike action by taxi drivers in Athens that could impact your cruise plans. And finally, there's news of a dramatic incident on Friday last when the Norwegian Epic was docked in Sicily. Welcome along to this week's Cruise News Roundup from the Solo Muster Drill. It's June 1st, 2025. So first up, Royal Caribbean have been in the cruise news this week. As I say, good and bad. So let's get the bad news out of the way first. So, hot off the heels of their overbooking of the Navigator of the Seas just a couple of weeks ago on a sailing from Los Angeles, they've done the same thing on an upcoming Quantum of the Seas sailing. This time it was a 7-day Alaska trip which was due to depart Seattle on June 2nd, and it appears that offers have been going out to people booked on that sailing, encouraging them to move to an alternative date. Now the compensation on offer is quite generous. That is Royal Caribbean's tendency in these situations. So it's highly likely that they will get enough voluntary uptake of the offer, so as not to avoid having to cancel cruises booked for guests who absolutely do want to travel on that date. So the compensation offer includes the cruise fare being refunded in full, obviously, plus a 100% equivalent credit being provided to go towards any other cruise. So if anybody is in a position to decide to change to a different date, it leaves them at quite a financial advantage. Despite this, it's concerning that Royal Caribbean are increasingly overbooking ships. And certainly their sister brand Celebrity Cruises have also hit the headlines for doing this on occasion over the past couple of years. While nobody knows quite what the intricacies are of the Royal Caribbean booking system or how the overbooking situation actually occurs, it's likely that it arises from sales of guarantee cabins. So for anybody who's not familiar with this concept, the guarantee cabin is essentially where you generally pay a lower than standard fare and you leave it to the cruise line to assign you a cabin anywhere on the ship within your selected stateroom category. So the actual cabin assignment can happen as late as the day that you're actually boarding the ship. Now this all allows the cruise line flexibility in cabin assignments, and it ensures that in the event of cancellations of specifically booked cabins or of no-shows on cruise day, that the ship still has fully paid up passengers scheduled to board and to fill those cabins. There is a risk, as may have happened in the case on Quantum of the Seas, that the number of guarantee cabins sold will actually exceed the number of available cabins as the sailing date approaches. This certainly gives some food for thought on the merits of booking a guarantee cabin on a cruise if you really want to take that cruise and if you have no flexibility to consider alternative dates. Now on to the good news from Royal Caribbean. So after 11 days in the open sea off the coast of Finland, the new Star of the Sea has successfully completed her sea trials. So that's well ahead of the scheduled inaugural sailing in August. The Star of the Sea is the largest in the Royal Caribbean Icon class of ships, and when launched it will join big sister Icon of the Seas and will become the largest cruise ship in the world. So over 2,000 maritime experts, including engineers and navigation experts, were on board during the sea trials. So they tested all aspects of the ship's performance and its seaworthiness. The ship will now spend the final few weeks at the Mar Turku shipyard in Finland, where it will be getting its finishing touches. And from August, the Star of the Seas will be homeported in Florida, and it will sail 7-day Eastern and Western Caribbean itineraries on alternate weeks. And waiting to join the crew on board is Sailor, and that is the oh-so-cute Chief Dog Officer. This gorgeous 4-legged crew member in waiting was born in February, and she's currently being trained for her new role. So there have been various social media posts this week which showed her being introduced by her boss, that's Royal Caribbean CEO Michael Bailey, to some of her future colleagues and to the cruise ship environment on board Icon of the Seas. Now Rover is the Chief Dog Officer on that ship, and together Sailor and Rover even have their own Instagram account. So it's called Chief Dog Officer The Goodest Girls at Sea, if you want to check that one out and see what they're getting up to. Moving on now to an announcement this week from MSC Cruises, and they have unveiled plans to sail the Southern Caribbean year-round. So the MSC Opera will be added to the fleet sailing in the region, and that'll be for the winter 2026-27 and summer 2027 seasons. The MSC Opera will join the MSC Seaview, and that's already been operating Southern Caribbean itineraries over recent winter seasons. The MSC Seaview will continue to operate out of its home port in Fort de France in Martinique, and from there it'll continue to visit several islands including Guadeloupe, San Martin, Dominica, Barbados and St. Lucia. The MSC Opera will also home port in Martinique, and that will offer 7 and 14 night cruises, and that will go to some of the Southern Caribbean islands that are less frequently on cruise itineraries. So that includes the British Virgin Islands, it includes St. Kitts and Nevis, and also the wonderful ABC islands of Aruba, Bonaire and Curacao. Reservations are now open for the new itineraries offered on the MSC Opera. So in news this week from Princess Cruises, we appear to have finally gotten to the bottom of the Sodagate controversy. Now, if you tuned in a couple of weeks ago, you'll know that there was consternation amongst Princess Cruise guests who were finding that despite having the Princess Plus or the Princess Premier packages, both of which include the drinks package, they were no longer able to get canned soft drinks or soda as part of the package. Instead, the only form of soft drink available was fountain soda. There were also varying reports from different ships about when and how this change was being implemented, and many wondered, given the consternation of loyal Princess cruisers, would this change actually be reversed? Unfortunately not. Princess appear to have finally drawn a line under this, as guests on board sailings this past week have been reporting that they're finding literature in their cabins on boarding day explaining the change. So basically, anybody who has the Princess Plus or the Princess Premier package, which, as I said, includes the drinks package amongst other things, they can only receive fountain soda as part of that package. Any canned soda will incur a separate charge. Bizarrely, guests who only have the Princess Soda package, so that's the non-alcoholic beverage package only, they will be able to get canned soda as part of that package. It just doesn't seem to make sense. Next up in Alaska cruise news, we revisit a story from a couple of weeks ago when at that time residents of Sitka were voting on potential cruise ship restrictions. Although the results of the ballot have yet to be formally certified by the Sitka Assembly, and that will occur at their June meeting, the good news for cruisers is that the proposed restrictions have been pretty comprehensively rejected by a massive 73% of the almost 3,000 residents who voted. The owner of the Sitka Sound cruise terminal is credited as having led the opposition to the proposed cruise ship restrictions. Had those restrictions been accepted, they would have applied to all cruise ships carrying more than 250 passengers. They would have imposed a daily cap of 4,500 cruise visitors and would have restricted cruise ship visits to 6 days per week, all of which would have taken effect for the 2026 cruise season. And that's despite Sitka Cruise Port already having cruise ships scheduled throughout that season. So it's good to know that those itineraries remain intact. Sitka port visits will go ahead, and the people of Sitka will apparently continue to welcome cruise visitors. And finally, turning to some cruise news in Europe. Now, if you're scheduled to embark or disembark a cruise in Athens or to visit Athens as a port of call in the near future, you should be aware that taxi drivers in the city took strike action for 2 days this week. They're protesting primarily against a policy that would mandate all new taxis registered from January 1st, 2026 to be zero emissions. Now, although it's unconfirmed at present, there is speculation that if issues remain unresolved, strike action may occur on a rolling basis throughout the busy summer season. In addition to this being a taxi driver strike, it has wider implications for those looking to make alternative travel plans. Basically, a number of other private operators, including private transfer companies and shuttle service operators, have indicated that in solidarity with taxi drivers, they do not plan to operate on strike days. So this may place cruisers in a predicament as regards how to get to and from the port in Piraeus on their embarkation or disembarkation day, and even if you're planning on taking a taxi to get into Athens city centre as a port of call. And the final news story this week also comes from Europe and from Sicily in particular, where on Friday last, NCL's Norwegian Epic broke loose from its moorings in the port of Catania. Now, around 1 p.m, it's reported that amidst high winds, the mooring lines snapped and the concrete mooring fixtures that they were tied to were ripped out of the ground on the pier. The most frightening aspect of this was undoubtedly that 2 passengers were on the gangway at the time, and one of those fell in the water. The woman's male companion is reported to have jumped in to save her. Now, both passengers were rescued from the water as the ship continued to drift away from the dock. Thankfully, they have not been reported to be seriously injured, but they were transferred to hospital as a precaution. Meanwhile, due to ongoing high winds, the Norwegian Epic was forced to remain away from the dock until much later on Friday evening when the winds had subsided. This, of course, resulted in passengers who had disembarked earlier in the day returning over the course of the afternoon, finding they were unable to board their ship. Lack of communication from NCL has been strongly criticised by many as they waited several hours to reboard at a cruise terminal which was ill prepared to handle the number of passengers assembled. The incident is currently being investigated by NCL and also by the Port Authority in Sicily, and it remains unclear at present whether the cause is primarily attributable to NCL's mooring lines or is it as a result of the mooring fixtures on the pier, and if so, they are the responsibility of the Port Authority. So let's hope that we don't hear of too many of those type of incidents in the future. That's all for this week. As always, if you found this Cruise News Roundup useful, please hit the like button and please consider subscribing to this very, very small channel. For now, thanks so much for watching and have a good week.